At 6:03, we'll call the meeting to order. The approval of the minutes of the meeting of October the 5th, 2020 and 22 meeting. I have a motion.
I move to approve the minutes of the meeting for the October 5th meeting of the Planning Commission.
And I second. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carried. Number 3, presentation on public transportation by Greg Downing, and Planning's South Central Transit Authority.
Mr. Downey, thank you for joining us. There's a button on the bottom of the mic. We are streaming the meeting this evening, so we'll ask anyone who participates this evening to use the microphone at the podium.
Testing. There it is.
Thank you. Welcome.
Welcome. Well, I'm saying welcome. Good evening, everybody. I am Greg Downing. I am the Executive Director for South Central Transit Authority, and we manage Red Rose Transit here in Lancaster as well as BARDA up in Reading. We are the managing group, and we oversee the workforce for both Lancaster as well as Reading. Next slide, please. As I said, I'm Greg Downing. I have a team of people here with me on this day prior to the Phillies game. I have our very own Jeff Glisson, Director of Capital Projects and Planning. We have Keith Boatman, who's the Associate Director of Capital Projects and Planning. He is the heir apparent to Jeffrey, who we've been holding on to for a great while now, and he's learning under Jeff. And of course, we leave the best for last, our very own Lori Ashgog, who is now our Manager of Transit Planning and Compliance. I'm sure you all are familiar with her. We have stolen her, and we are great to have her, or I should say we are appreciative to have her here. Next slide, please. Who are we? As I stated earlier, we are the managing group for both Red Rose Transit and BARDA in Lancaster and in Reading for the public transit authorities in both areas. We manage both authorities. I'll say the Red Rose encompasses the drivers, mechanics, and everyone doing the everyday job. All of the support staff as well as management is under SCTA, and we do the same for BARDA. What we do, fixed route bus service, that's one of the things we have. As you know, our Queen Street station is our garage as well as our bus station where we have and where we serve the passengers of Lancaster County. Last year we transported 1.2 million people, and that's down from our pre-COVID numbers of 1.7 million people for the year. This year is looking a lot better, I think, because we're moving further and further, I should say, more comfortable in the COVID era, I'll say. We're anticipating those numbers to be even greater. As of right now, they are even greater than they have been for the last fiscal year. Special features. One of the things that I'll highlight in a few other slides, in a few slides down the road, is our mobile app, which we were able to start during COVID. It helped us it was part of our initiative to make sure that we had as many precautions during the COVID pandemic as possible. And our mobile app was one where you could pay your bus fare using your mobile phone, which it seems everyone has one these days, as well as we have cards that you could use to, similar to a credit card that would also put fares on, and you could use that also. Our shared ride transportation is the same. It is one of our keystone parts to our transportation. It allows us to transport people that are in need, usually seniors, but we do have a little bit of everyone who we are transporting to hospitals, to shopping, to doctor's appointments and all. And once again, Queen Street Station, we do have a waiting area where you can purchase passes and get schedules. This is just a picture of what it looks like from I guess, from the rooftop of our building. And our garage. This is our parking garage. It's right on the corner of Chestnut and Queen. On the first floor of it, it is a restaurant, but it does have parking, 395 parking spaces in the parking garage, and I'm sure everyone has heard about the approval of our board to allow developers to build condominiums on top of the parking garage. So that is something that's being embarked on as we speak. It is not even in the stages of being built and things of that nature. It's a lot of other preliminary groundwork that needs to take place, but we did, and our board did take action to move forward. Where does the bus go? Our fixed route buses, we have 19 routes. That's including 2 routes that serve Millersville on campus, as well as from Millersville to Park City Mall, but we have what we would call a spoken wheel type of system that starts inside the city, inside our transit center, and it moves out from there. This is an example of the map that shows our county routes. So we go all the way out to Gap, Elizabethtown, which are our 2 longest routes, as well as we do the other outlying areas, Lidditz, Ephrata, New Holland, and such. This map here, even with glasses, I'm looking at it. It is a map of the city, but we do have 5 city routes that we have that encompass and take into consideration all of the ridership that needs to come into the city to go out to county routes. This here is our ride guide, which we have all kinds of information in there, including our apps that we've used now to the My Stop app that shows you where the bus is, as well as highlighting our mobile ticketing options that we have. And speaking of which, RRTA Go Mobile is our mobile platform that we use that you can, there is a example of a ticket there that you can use to scan on our validators to get on our buses. This is one of the newest technologies that we have on our bus, along with free Wi-Fi and all of it. This is just an idea of where buses are. You can click on it to find out where your bus is at whatever the time is. You can click on that bus and it'll tell you exactly where the bus is. That's just a diagram of it. And another diagram showing you how and where the bus is and where it's supposed to be. And this here is our feedback button that's assigned on our Go Mobile app. You can leave feedback regarding your ride, regarding the customer service received, as well as any other thoughts or comments that you need and would want to express. We get that every day. It comes to me. So not only do I see all of the comments and I'm able to make sure that they're answered in a timely manner, but it also keeps us abreast of what our customers are feeling and doing and needing from our service. Again, that's the smart card that I explained a little earlier. It goes with our mobile app. It's similar to a credit card. You scan it once you get on the bus, and it takes money off, and or you can use it as a transfer if you've paid already. And the South Central Transit Authority, this particular slide, I want to highlight the Transit Development Plan, which we are kicking off on Friday. The Transit Development Plan is a plan that we use to reinvent, if you would say, or I should say, take a look at our existing service and look to make any and all changes. This is an outside contracting firm that comes and they contact all types of all of our stakeholders in each and every aspect in each and every neighborhood. So we'll be reaching out to a lot of you to get feedback because the service only works if we are able to provide for the customers that need it. If we're going places that it's not needed, we need to change that, and this is a way and an option of how we can change and make changes for it. Again, this is just a picture of our mobile app as well as our bus station, just showing what we do, what we have, and the things that we're able to do with that. And this here is our bus finder. I explained a little bit about it. It's where you can click on a bus off of one of the maps. It'll tell you exactly where it's at, and it'll tell you where it should be if you're at the stop that you want to be. Again, this is an up close and personal picture of it. And finally, I'll touch on our Be Nice campaign. It's our customer service campaign that we've also embarked on. We embarked on this in 2019, which it was just before COVID. And needless to say, at COVID, it kind of took a back seat because we needed to make sure safety was taken, I should say, put to the forefront. But it stands for Better Expectations, New and Improved Customer Experience. It involves our commitment to customers and our customer service, that each and every driver has gone through the training. Each and every driver has been trained on what our way, quote unquote, is regarding handling customers, regarding giving service that is unique to the area that we're in, as well as it's personalized to each and every customer. That is what our goal is to make sure that you have a pleasurable ride in our facilities as well as in our buses. Now I will take a seat and give it straight to Lori Ashcott. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gibb.
Good evening. As Greg said, I'm Lori Alskog, the Manager of Transit Planning and Compliance. And so I'm going to talk about the very fun topic of planning, which that's why we're here. As Greg had mentioned, our guiding document is our Transit Development Plan that was last done in 2018. We update it every 5 years. It's about a 10-year planning horizon that we look at, short, medium, and long-term goals. We selected Foursquare Integrated Planning as our consultant. And if you want to go, I have a nice little graphic. Yay! Oh. As Greg said, we're kicking off that update process on Friday, so we're excited about that. And so that will take about a year for adoption, so we'll have public involvement and surveys and everything with that. Next slide. Part of that process, with the recommendations that come out, deal with the route and service planning of our buses, and this is a very simplified version of that process. I've put it into about 10 steps here. So I'll go through them quickly. We analyze the current ridership. We look for suggestions from all the employees of Red Rose Transit and South Central and public suggestions. We have an internal review committee. We have recommendations. We have a 30-day public comment period where we hopefully receive more comments. We have a public hearing that's required. The review committee looks at the comments, makes some final recommendations, then it goes to the SCTA board for approval. After that, the operators look at their new schedules, because there can be time changes and everything, so the drivers, look at those. We print the ride guides, a picture that you saw previously in the presentation, and then the new schedule starts. And then this is repeated. It's about an 8-month process, so that is something that we are always looking at to improve the routes, see if we can make changes. One of the planning, can you go back one? Thank you. One of the planning documents that SCTA created in 2010 was a transit-oriented development handbook. And if nobody has seen that, I'm not surprised. We created this with a consultant, and it was a very good resource, but SCTA did not do the best job of distributing it to the municipalities and following up with that. But even though it's 10 years old, more than 10 years old, the concepts of transit-oriented development still hold true, but it would be something that we would look to update in the future. This is a recent document that SCTA assisted with, Building Better Bus Stops Guide. This was created through the Pennsylvania Public Transportation Association, PPTA, and PennDOT, their Bureau of Public Transit. And this is a resource for anybody, but municipalities, transit providers. You can go to the next slide. And one of the things that it provides, in addition to, again, their guidelines, they're not requirements, but they're best practices within the state and across the country that the consultant looked at, providing some design guidelines and recommendations for starting from just a bus stop with a sign, and then as you go up to have a shelter. So this is one of the diagrams that's in there. It's a little blurry when I enlarged it, but you can see the blue area there that's marked number 1. That would be what the ADA loading area. Beside that, the brown roof that you see would be a shelter, and then I think that might have been a bike rack in the corner there, but some of the minimum requirements to meet ADA. And this is just an example. You don't have to follow this depending on your site constraints, but it's just an example. Next slide. So now I'm going to turn to county planning. So SCTA has been a partner and a stakeholder with the county planning documents that I would say that everybody here is familiar with. Places 2040, the County Comprehensive Plan, the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, Connects 2040, which is the Long Range Transportation Plan, and of course the Lancaster Active Transportation Plan. And the one thing that I wanted to highlight in this, for these, there's animation that you can go. Next one, and the next one. Transit is integral to all of these plans. As I said, we were a partner there. Transit is included in the actions and the goals, having a multimodal transportation system. And each one of those, you can go to the next slide, has the concept of a mobility hub. This was a concept that was first mentioned in the 2014 Transit Development Plan, listed as transfer centers, and it was a newer concept then. Now it has grown. This is just a graphic that I pulled from actually a place in the UK, but all of the county plans identify mobility hubs, and the active transportation plan identify mobility hubs, primary, secondary, and tertiary. So it would go from primary, would be in the city, would be the Amtrak train station. So that would tie in with the small area plan that's going on right now, and looking all of what should be included with that. So I just like this graphic. It shows transit, it shows the shelter, looks probably like a bike share. I won't mention the scooters. I don't know how that is. Some people, yes, some people no, but it is in other places. The electric vehicle charging, looks like probably an Amazon drop-off, and then you have a little bit of the green space there and a coffee stand. So, I mean, this scale of mobility hub is something that you could see in the city. And the mobility hubs can go from just a small, if it's just a stop with a kiosk or something, or to a larger scale development with mixed use and residential and all kinds of things. Next slide. Oh, I thought I had changed that title. Maybe I did. Never mind. So now looking at city planning documents, which I guess everybody has memorized because there's going to be a quiz, and word for word you should all know these documents. So the streetscape design guidelines from 2004, which transit is included. The bus shelters are identified and Red Rose Transit, but it's just general locations and kind of a design of a shelter, and that lighted advertising is included. So this would be a resource that I believe is on the plan for the city to have updated. So that would be something that we would want to be a part of that and have some of the recommendations or the guidelines from the Building Better Bus Stops guide, if that would be appropriate whenever this is updated. Next slide. And the city has a complete streets policy, which right there we have a nice red bus. So definitely part of what a complete street has, and the multimodal transportation network. Next slide. And then something that everybody here should know about, and I don't know if you've seen a rendition of this plan. This is for 250 College Avenue, but this is so related to transit being a part of the subdivision land development ordinance requirements. This development here was looking to relocate the transit stop, so we coordinated with the engineer, and so that was how we were part of the process, again, being a partner with city planning. Next slide. And then zoning. Again, what everybody here is familiar with, and I would say I'm not an expert in zoning, so I didn't see all the regulations, how many there were related to transit, so that may be something that would be, we could look to update. The transit-oriented development handbook that we had, again, was not as specific on the guidelines, but as we look to update that, that would be something that, we would want to make sure that it's getting review comments from this committee as well for that document. And then the city comp plan, which we've been involved in, and these are a couple of community objectives that I pulled out, and you can go. Transit corridors mentioned, and using public transit and new forms of transportation. That was one thing I forgot to mention. One of the things with the transit development plan that we'll be looking at that's new for us is microtransit, on-demand transit services. So that's something that, will be most likely in addition to the fixed route bus services that we have to cover some areas that we aren't able to cover with that service, but there is demand in that area, so we would be looking for some type of microtransit service there. And that would be something that, like I said, is will be analyzed with the transit development plan. And the Vision Zero action plan that was adopted. So the blue lines are the transit routes within the city. The red lines are the high injury network, and the red dots are the top intersection locations. So while this isn't specifically planning directly, I mean, this is roadway improvements, which there are planning aspect to them. I just wanted to point out that all of the improvements that are done to make a safe, walkable, bikeable community all those improvements will encourage transit use. So we support all of the work within this Vision Zero plan, and obviously with our routes that coincide with the high injury network. We want to make sure that our passengers boarding and alighting our buses are safe, and also getting to the buses, they have safe routes to and from. So the first thing or one of the last things I wanted to say was thank you for inviting us to the table. I'm new to the Transit Authority, 6 months here, but I previously worked at the County Planning Department, so I've worked with the Transit Authority before. But I can say that my time at SCTA, I've been to more meetings with city things going on than a lot of time at the county. So it seems that you guys have so many things going on, which is great, and the improvements and the revitalization to the city. But including South Central Transit in those discussions, and being a partner where we can is great. And like I said, we wanted to say thank you, and keep inviting us to the table. We definitely want to be a part of it. You can go back one. So here are a few things, specific things that we would say for the Planning Commission to assist with encouraging transit. Number one, include transit policies and actions within the comprehensive plan update, which I'm pretty sure they're going to be in there, but I figured I should state it. As I mentioned before, the streetscape development guidelines, looking at specific design specifications, so that those are known there, that we need 5 foot by 8 foot minimum for a loading pad, and the bus stop sign needs to be this far off the ground, those things in there, so that it's clear what transit needs, and then also what you're requiring of your land developments. And then also related to that is any other design specifications that could be in the zoning ordinance or the subdivision land development ordinance, whenever updates to those documents take place. And then the final thing that I didn't include on here is, like I said, the transit development plan is starting. So we will be having interviews with stakeholders, and community input is definitely needed. So we'll be sending out surveys. It'll be on the website that Greg showed with the green bar that we just have, where the transit development plan is. So we just want to ask you for your input, and help us make the recommendations, and then with the implementation of the plan. Thank you. And I don't know if there's time for questions, or if we went over our time.
Sure. There's time for questions.
Okay. I don't know if there are any questions that anyone has, but.
All right. Thank you for being here. I am a huge supporter of public transit, and I actually think that increasing the access and ability to utilize public transit is part of how we make living in Lancaster more affordable. I think it's directly correlated to affordable housing, because if we have a more robust transit system, it means that more places are developable. I don't know if that's a word. I don't want to run this meeting long, and so maybe I should potentially use that feedback option and reach out to Mr. Downing as well, but I did want to ask some questions. Thank you for creating the mobile app. I use it. I'm very glad that I don't need to have coins in my pocket all the time. I was curious how that system is managed, and what potential integrations there may be, because I've traveled to other cities, not many, but other places throughout the country, and I sometimes have difficulty using, for example, I need to open Bus Finder to get a more accurate read on what's going on live, and I don't seem to be able to get that with the app. So I just wanted to get a little bit of insight onto how the application's managed and future updates, if there are any, to integrating your systems.
I'm here.
Something.
Yeah, I'm here. I could take that one. We have been, along with our transit development plan, we have been getting updates with our app that should be, right now, it should be right where it needs to be in regards to certain aspects of it. And I'll explain without getting too deep. We have to be on the Google platform to be able to be on, for our My Stop to Work, because it's on a Google platform.
Okay.
Anytime we make a change to a time, to a street, to a detour, those are things that we have to go through Google to make sure it gets back to the back end. We've been having that difficulty since COVID. So I'm told that we should be good by our IT director, but I'm quite sure and quite certain. I checked it before I got here to make sure. I didn't want to be in front of you, but yeah, it should be working as we speak.
Okay. And you mentioned Google. I'm actually glad you mentioned Google. I had spoken with somebody, a city resident who's a coder. We were trying to figure out why we can't see transit for Red Rose Transit on Google Maps. He checked out the API, and this kind of clarifies that you got to go to Google. But do you know why the routes don't show up in Google Maps then? Because I think that would be advantageous for people who aren't familiar with the system yet.
Exactly. We have to break down transit language into Google language. So to put it in its most simplest form, it requires a lot of man hours. It requires a lot of things to go right to make sure that you're on Google's platform. They require a lot from us. They require a lot for us to do. It has been a steady stream of, I'd say in 2019, we had everything on there. We made a few changes and it bounced us out.
Okay.
So we took the adage at that time to look at our own app and just basically concentrate on our own app being
A similar
being straight.
experience.
Exactly.
Okay.
As opposed to Google, we're saying My Stop basically. So you have two different areas.
Gotcha. Because I understand that resources are a concern for a public transit agency, and it's not like you're making bank over there. I do think that getting back onto the Google platform would be a great move, because as we see new people moving to the city, it, again, just people aren't familiar with public transit, and we probably agree on this, I get frustrated with how stigmatized the bus system is, because I really do think it's the future for us. So that aside, I also wanted to ask about the management of your stop infrastructure, because it seems like it's a lot. Like you got to focus on making sure you have the staff and equipment to get people to and from places all the time. And we've had a conversation, not we in this room necessarily, but we as a larger community have started to raise this conversation of a lack of seating and comfort at bus stops. I was unable to locate this report from the past that ROTA had done, but it's not the service itself that's part of the issue. It's the waiting and wanting to wait sometimes, especially in inclement weather. Is Red Rose coming up to like a struggle in terms of managing that infrastructure? And is there something we can do to help?
I don't think it's more of a, and I think I'm understanding about where we had, and it's funny, I just was speaking to the gentleman over there. I spoke recently about chairs at bus stops and things of that nature, not having seats at bus stops, and although it's a big problem for where we are here. I'm originally from Philadelphia, so we have pretty much bus stops that that do have shelters, as well as we have more frequency there. But here, it's amplified because of the service that we provide. What I'll say is, we have a lot of red tape that we have to go through to get things done. And I'll give an example of that. We have PennDOT right-of-ways that we have to go through to put a shelter up. So to put a shelter up, you might get clearance for a shelter up, but you might not get clearance for a bench. You might not get, so it's not just a Red Rose doesn't want to put a bench out for people to sit at. It's just a process that you must go through as you try and get the accommodations for people that need them.
Sure.
I'll say that and that's just one example. You also have where you have to see if your bus stop is on businesses, and you have to go through getting permission from a business that you can put a shelter and a stop there. So it's a lot of things that are in between where you have to, and we have to, try and get access before we can even put a shelter and a bus stop up. Just to make sure we're clear, we have shelters and bus stops, as well as benches to put them up. But we still have to go through that process of getting the okay, of getting the permission, and of making sure it's the right dimensions for the area that we're talking about.
So you do have some inventory basically waiting to be installed, but you need to get these clearances to install it.
We have, I should say we have grounds for, or I should say we have means for the shelters and things that we would be able to get. That's not the problem. The inventory in getting the benches and things is not the problem. Again, it's the red tape and I wouldn't say red tape, I would say the procedures and policies that you have to go through to be able to get a shelter as well as a...
No, I mean, I'd call it red tape. I think a struggle that is not just relatable to Red Rose Transit, but as far as the city and like walkability, like PennDOT really is something that hangs over our head. We can't even put a crosswalk across a state road without going to them for permission, getting a transportation permit, getting that all documented, sent back and forth. So, I mean, I would call it red tape. I don't fault you for using those words at all.
Mr. Dastra, thank you for your comments. Do you mind if we invite other commission members, just with the limited time that we have, perhaps they can offer some questions and input?
Yeah, I wasn't sure if anybody had any questions or comments. I apologize.
Yes, we do.
Well, everyone looked at me. I'm sorry.
Finish.
I mean, I guess to wrap it up, because like I said, I will use that feedback.
And you have my information. You know how to reach me. It's not, I'm not hiding. So anytime you need to get in contact with me.
This isn't so much a comment for you as much as it is a general comment to the rest of the commission and the public. I don't know if Red Rose Transit Authority received any ARPA dollars, but as far as I'm concerned, if there is a need and it falls within the purview of ARPA funding, we've allocated $5 million to affordable housing, and I feel it's reasonable for us to allocate funds to assist you guys in increasing your capacity and infrastructure and whatever you need to make this a better system for all of us, and I appreciate the work that you do.
Thank you.
Similar question in relationship to the bus stops. There's a bus stop at Hershey and Walbank on the north side, and at one point, Hershey and Walbank, there was a bench there. I think pre-COVID. Now the bench has been removed for the last year, 2 years. Could you speak to that?
Specifically, I'm not sure. We don't pull benches. We don't pull seats, and it may not have been our bench. That's what, and Jeff is the planning and capital projects director, and it may not have been our bench, but could you write that down? Yeah. I can get back to you as far as what we would know about it, but.
Yeah, there is an apartment building right next to there. So I'm not certain.
We would have to check it out. I'm
Okay.
definitely not
Yeah,
sure.
on the north side, Hershey and Walbank.
Okay.
Yeah, diagonal from the Brightside Church.
Familiar. I'm familiar with it.
Yeah.
We have one of our board members that lives not too
Okay.
far from there. So.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
On screen 36, you have Vision Zero, and then you had a map with blue lines and red lines. And you called the red lines High Injury Network? I'm not sure what that means. I don't know. You could explain that.
Yeah, that was actually taken from the Vision Zero Action Plan. It's a network that was defined through that plan that has high injuries.
What do you mean injury, like vehicular injuries?
Pedestrian and bicycle,
Okay, okay.
or vehicular too. It's looking at, the Vision Zero is looking at no fatalities or serious injury crashes. And so this was a route that was identified through that plan. And then the dots are intersections that have high injuries as well.
And I'd be happy to forward more information of the Planning Commission on the Vision Zero initiative, if you're interested in learning more.
I have one quick question. So I saw that you were going to have opportunities for public comment and feedback. What's the best way for residents to find out about those opportunities? And do you have a sense of, like, timing-wise when that's going to happen?
I don't know the schedule right now. That's something that, again, when we're kicking it off on Friday, we'll finalize that. It will definitely be in the beginning of the new year. The first things will be, gathering existing data and who the stakeholders are going to be, and looking at dates for when public meetings would be, at least, kind of at least a month right now. We will advertise that. The website will be the main key. We'll have the information there, but we'll look to our stakeholders and other groups that we're involved with. The distribution list that the city has with the comprehensive plan, the city alliance, the municipalities that we work with. We'll be asking everybody to send it out. Our marketing manager, we do have a social media presence. It's very small, but we do post things on there. Although you have to look, there are two separate Red Rose Transit authorities. One is not us, but we will put information on social media as well. But yeah, any assistance that anybody has when we do the surveys and public meetings and all that, we would appreciate getting the word out.
Any other comments from the commission? I have one comment before we turn it over to the public. You recently lost one of your writers, Miss Hazel Gann. You remember her? Yeah. She,
I do.
Go ahead, if you want to speak.
We had a lot of our bus drivers that sent cards in, as well as she's been a long time customer, passenger, rider, affectionate, I'll say, unofficial Red Rose representative. But yes, we are and we were very saddened by the news. As I said, a lot of our operators took it upon themselves to go out, as well as speak to and give their, I'll say, respects, pay their respects, if we will.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, she was 98 years old.
Yeah,
In fact, this month she'd been 99.
Wow.
Last month, rather. The public comments? Questions? Yes.
Yes, we do.
Can you restate the question,
Oh, okay, I can.
please?
The question was, do we have any type of connection and or network with, to stop people from parking in bus stops? That the bus was not able to pull all the way to the curb so that they could get on the bus. That's a problem that we experience a lot in certain areas. And we do have, and we have been working with police as well as the parking authority, especially during the daytime hours, to I guess you could say, to discourage that. From the sounds of it, it doesn't sound like it's working as well as we need it to. But I'll say usually at night we have more of a problem, but during the day, the parking authority is more than happy to help us and assist us by getting those cars out of there and or ticketing the cars that are there.
Any public comment?
Yeah, so, we were talking about stops and stops.
Yeah, could you come to the mic, please? Thank you. State your name.
John Hirsch, East Ross Street. Yeah, I wanted to ask you about kind of the bus stop infrastructure and just, you're saying that it's primarily the red tape and just getting the approvals and things like that that's getting in the way and not necessarily a resource gap. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are as far as, or has RRTA kind of identified, okay, this might be a sweet spot where maybe we don't have to deal with PennDOT at this particular location because, obviously that's always hard to deal with. Or, is there a business that is kind of eager to put a stop somewhere? Do you have, I guess my question is, do you have places identified? You don't have to say which ones, but I'm just curious if there are places that are identified and maybe that's part of your new comprehensive plan. But yeah, I'm curious if there are spots that you're thinking there's a good chance we could get a bus chair or bench or shelter down. Thank you.
I'll speak to that. Yes, there are some stops that we do have already outlined as far as needing to or finding a need and having a need. But there are also some things that I think I'll dive into a little bit deeper. I'll try and be as brief as possible. But for example, if we have a bus stop, a business that identified themselves as wanting a shelter and a bench. It was on the outbound side on Harrisburg Pike across from the post office. So if you can picture that, it's right before you get to the new Wegmans and the new little, I won't say strip mall, but the new little area over there. But it was on our outbound side. And it, from a transit perspective, it made no sense to put a bench on that side of the street when our bus route ends 3 blocks up the street at Park City Mall. And anybody getting off the bus at that stop would not be sitting there to get a bus to go to Park City Mall. The likelihood would be that somebody on the side of the post office waiting to come back in town would need a bus shelter and stop and bench and things of that nature. So although we had someone willing to put a bench and a shelter there, it did not make sense to have people, and it created the ability to be a dangerous stop if we put a shelter and bench there, because you would have people sitting there, and when the bus is coming back down, they would be running across the street, across a 3-lane street to try and catch the bus on the inbound when we would try and get it on the inbound side. So those are things, that's an example of what I'm talking about when I say it's a lot of things that go into putting a stop, putting a shelter, and knowing where and when, and not creating a bigger problem when we're trying to solve a problem of getting people and giving people access.
I have a question related to those stops.
Yes.
Is this kind of information notices, such as if you were putting up a new bench or a new shelter, is this information that you all advertise to your customers via the app?
No, it would not be something that we would put on the app. I'm trying to think, will we put a notice out
Newsletter, anything? Is it announced to customers?
on a shelter? For the shelter? We would announce, yes. We would, and I hesitate to say that because I have a team here because I don't deal with everything in particular, but the reason we're all here is to answer these questions and to try and get as much clarity as we can out as far as the public is concerned. Yes, I'm told that we would be putting that information out when we would be moving to that next phase of being able to actually put it out and do the things, meaning that we would be through the red tape and be able to move forward with it.
Yes.
Maybe we can just limit it to one more question, just for the sake of time. Thank you.
It's a quick one. Adriana Atencio, Fifth Street, also Executive Director of the Commonweal. We are very lucky to have a great bike share system in this city. And I'm just wondering if there is any consideration to give discounts, integrate anything with the bike share system and RRTA to encourage people to use bike share, also get on RRTA, go from point A to point B, especially considering our bike share system. You can use the app here, get off in Harrisburg, and then get right on a bike in Harrisburg. Same in Hershey, same in York. So a partnership like that could really do a lot to get people to use mass transit. Yeah.
I'm not sure I understood that question. I'm looking.
Bikes and buses.
Oh.
How can we make them work together better? These riders, those things.
We've been trying, we work with a lot of the bike share, what's his name? Carl. Yeah, I'm sorry, again, I have a team here to help me. But yes, we have been trying to work and to collaborate. We recognize and we have what I should say is, I'm shooting for a bigger purpose. I'm shooting to make sure that we have accessibility for everyone that needs it. I'm shooting for a opportunity to give people a chance to have alternative measures as to driving cars and things of that nature. We're trying to do what we can do to give people options, and in that we have been trying to team and promote bike share. We have a bike rack on our buses and all of these things. We're actually on the board of community services also, and they talk as well as have a lot of action items regarding bike share and things of that nature. I'm sorry I wasn't in the microphone. But.
If there are any remaining questions from planning commissioners, I'd be happy to forward them to them. Feel free to put them in writing, and maybe I can just, so you're not bombarded by all of us individually, we can coordinate those questions, and I'd be happy to facilitate that.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dowman.
Can I just take a minute real quick? I wanted to say that I appreciate the efforts that Mr. John Hirsch has been doing to try and make a more comfortable experience for our city residents and the bus system. So thank you for being here tonight, Mr. Hirsch.
Okay. Number 4, presentation on housing study by Todd Pohl, founder of Forward Planning Incorporated.
And Todd, if you don't mind, just some brief background. Todd is part of our larger consultant team for the city's comprehensive plan. Forward Planning is one of the sub-consultants under the Bergman consulting team, who we heard a presentation from, I guess about a month ago. And our comprehensive plan is, just for the general public, is really our foundational policy plan for land use and physical development in the city. And what we try to do is merge the objectives, the desires of our broader community through engagement with best practices from our consultants, as well as the data that we're collecting on what Lancaster City is today and where we want to go. So Todd is one of the key people on the team to help us describe what existing conditions are in Lancaster City. And with that, I'll let you take it away.
Douglas, thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, good evening. Planning Board members, good evening. Just a quick commercial. Forward planning, we are land use economists, and I like to say we get to play SimCity for real. We perform economic and real estate analysis on behalf of public and private sector clients nationally. We work on a variety of comprehensive plans, certainly throughout the Commonwealth, but we also do a lot of redevelopment, TOD or transit-oriented development work. We work on the economics of parks and trails, and we do a lot of housing, including affordable housing analysis, all the way to the east of the Mississippi and down to Delaware. I'm going to bring you through a very high-level presentation. Douglas said I've got about 15 minutes, and then open it up for about 15 minutes of Q&A. And you'll see it says issues of consequence, because the fact of the matter is the report that we've produced, and I believe maybe some of you have seen it already, and it will be made public, is a pretty long, extensive document. And it covers everything from demographics. As a matter of fact, I can tell you what we've done thus far on this process to date. Is we've completed socioeconomic trend analysis, labor and industry trend analysis, real estate market trends analysis. We've also provided detailed mapping, which has included social infrastructure. So thinking of in terms of, are there enough licensed childcare facilities, park accessibility, supermarket access, affordable housing. Neighborhood change analysis. The city asked us, actually, this was something that was kind of added in a little bit after we originally submitted, to look at how, at the neighborhood level, which is really looking at the block group and census tract level, how demographic shifts have come about over the last 10 and 20 years. And then finally, we've also provided improvement to land value analysis, which is basically looking at the value of real estate to determine whether or not we have a redevelopment parcel that we're staring at. Usually, if the improved value on the land is less than the land or no more than the land itself, it's probably ripe for redeveloping. So we've done that kind of analysis as well. We are scheduled after this to complete identification of redevelopment activities and programs, including identifying and evaluating activities and programs, redevelopment prioritization tool, which is a tool we will develop in Excel and leave behind with Douglas and his team to evaluate redevelopment projects. And then we will also be performing fiscal impact analysis as well on proposed or potential development, including looking at the provision of incentives such as LRTA, to understand when you provide a LRTA, and I can tell you we do this analysis for a variety of municipalities. A lot of municipalities, not just in this state, but in a lot of states, because we work in them, give out incentives like they're going out of style, right? And the way that incentive should work is the first person in gets the greatest incentive because they're pioneering. The next person in gets something slightly less than that. The next person after that gets something slightly less than that. And unless you know what you're giving away through doing a, kind of a fiscal impact analysis, you don't know, what that cost is. So we're going to be doing a deep dive on that. Now, issues of consequence. They're really, I've got on the screen here 6 graphic images, which I think depict some of these issues of consequence. Hopefully my pointer's not working. Let's see that way. The first one, workforce housing. And housing in general, housing is going to be your biggest issue of consequence, and certainly the comprehensive plan can help address this. But workforce housing in particular, and we can talk about the, is it workforce housing, is it affordable housing, right? It's both, right? And we're really talking about housing that folks who are at the middle income levels and the lower income levels can afford to live in the city. Clearly, and based on the analysis that we've done, based on the more than a dozen interviews that we conducted with private developers, with nonprofit developers who are active in the city, this is clearly your major issue. At present, and really as of several months back when we really finished this, there are more than 2,000 units that have been identified at somewhere in the pipeline of development in the city of Lancaster. However, what I will tell you is that large majority of those units are targeted at the market rate level. In other words, they are not designed for low and moderate income people generally. Some of these projects will have housing that is affordable to folks at those income levels. But the fact remains is that there's still far too few housing units that meet that need. One of the comments that we got back, and this is really on the screen, is there is a fierce and direct competition between for-profit developers and nonprofit developers for land, right? And obviously, as we know, land and property generally is a finite resource. They're not making any more of it. And this is only going to get, obviously the situation is going to get worse as more and more property gets scooped up and developed. What does that entail? Well, as I understand, currently the city does have an ADU or permits for ADUs or accessory dwelling units. That's one way to start addressing the affordability issue. Another way is to rehab housing units that are currently vacant and might be physically obsolescent, putting those back in play. Obviously, it is encouraging more the inclusion of affordable housing in projects that get developed new. It will also be looking at adaptively reusing buildings. All right, we work on a lot of projects that take what were formerly factory buildings, or in some cases, shopping center sites that are economically and or physically obsolescent, and either redeveloping those sites in whole or in part, and part of that is putting affordable housing on that property. So it's something that we want to consider, and we'll be talking about, I think, further in policies, as we move along into the comprehensive plan. One of the other issues that we identified is there's a mismatch between the number of small households, and 1 and 2 person households in particular, and the type of housing that is available for those households. One of the things, if you're paying attention to, and I'm sure you are, to the housing that's being developed in your city, a lot of it is rental, and a lot of it are apartments, and those are going to be studios, 1s and 2s, right? That is not by coincidence. That is the private development community responding to the marketplace. There are still, even notwithstanding all those units being developed, there are still too few units. And just by way of example, we identified that I think it's 65% of the households in the city of Lancaster are comprised of 1 and 2 person households. Those are typically small households. However, less than 45%, maybe as low as 42% of the housing units in the city represent studios, 1s and 2 bedrooms. So that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about a mismatch, is that those two things need to come more into alignment in order to have some balance. Projected household growth among non-family households, again, these are going to be your smaller households. And this is a phenomenon that we see throughout the state, throughout the, really throughout the country. The fastest growth among households are non-family households. Non-family households are comprised of either 1 person, or if it's more than 1 person, these are people who are unrelated by birth, blood, some kind of marital relationship, right? And that's going to continue to be the case, particularly in the city. Now, having said that, the city has a relatively large share of Latino population, which is roughly 47% based on the stats that we pulled, right? within that particular, ethnic group, multi-generational living is, is favored by a large number of the folks in that community. And so what we also see is that there does need to be single-family, large housing units in the city, and those, that exist need to be, probably made such that they are accommodative of a variety of generations, including the elderly. There are a lot of housing units in the city that are not, let's say, age-friendly. And I know we most recently gave a policy seminar, and one of those sessions was on age-friendly housing. So that's a key issue. Workforce training is going to be big, and really you've got a large population in this city that have not obtained and probably will not obtain a four-year college degree, which is fine. But at the same time, their income prospects could be limited depending on the career path that they choose. One of the things that we've identified there are opportunities to pursue a career that does not require a college degree, yet provides living wage employment and upward mobility. And in particular, we're talking about the skilled trades. And we see this, my firm sees this everywhere that we do this type of labor analysis. Matter of fact, we're doing a project or finishing a project up in Binghamton, New York, and similar situation. They've got a large population, a number of whom are, probably not going to secure a college degree, yet there are jobs paying $70,000 and $80,000 a year that are going begging, and these are in the trades and in manufacturing. While manufacturing has been declining here in the city and in the county, it is still a relatively strong industry insofar as it represents at the county level about 13%, or 13 out of every 100 jobs in the county, as of the data that we pulled, is within manufacturing. In the city itself, it's closer to about 1 in 10. So it's still significant. And what I will tell you is that old school manufacturing has, probably gone the way of the dinosaur, but more modern manufacturing, where it really requires, people to be numerate literate and be able to follow directions, yet not have a college degree. That's the manufacturing of the future. That type of manufacturing doesn't require a lot of space. Think of 3D printing machines that are, in some cases building houses or cars. That's going to be big. We're recommending that there should be, and we've heard this in some of our meeting sessions, that there should be support for apprenticeship programs, and that, perhaps providing building space for doing so. There's a project that we are working on up in Rhode Island right now, where they have, and this is in Cumberland, Rhode Island, they have a building that was, a former factory building that the town took over, and they've made available for skilled training, both classroom training and hands-on training. That's something that perhaps the city of Lancaster could consider. You do have some buildings that are probably fit that profile that are currently not being used. And I would also say that increasing the local pool of skilled trade workers not only obviously benefits them directly and first and foremost, but it provides a larger labor pool for those folks who are going to be working on preserving your historic buildings, as well as preserving and creating more affordable housing. So this is a win-win situation there. One of the reasons that we've identified in a lot of projects that we work on that construction costs have gone so high is there just aren't enough workers who are skilled to do the work. And this is in a lot of communities. This is an opportunity to help yourself and help the people that would benefit from it, particularly those who would, like to go into housing and affordable housing unit, is to have more skilled carpenters, welders, plumbers, electricians, and so forth who are available in the city of Lancaster. This is both an opportunity and a challenge. You have a relatively young population. I believe the median age at last count that we looked at is, I want to say it's 33, relative to 40 and 42 for the county and the state respectively. All right, so it's pretty young. It will probably remain that way for a while. You've got, a lot of young families that have moved in or young people that are having families. And so why, opportunities and challenges? Well, obviously the opportunity is that it's going to bring in new workers as well as entrepreneurial talent. We recognize and talk about this a little bit more, that a lot of people that have come into the city, a lot of young people are also bringing their entrepreneurial and business startup, ventures with them. That's a great thing. Your younger workers are typically going to have greater discretionary income or the ability to spend more on goods and services in town, particularly restaurants and shops. And we want to see more of that. However, these are the same folks who are struggling to find housing that is affordable to their income levels. And depending on which industries that they're working in, such as the staff for these shops and restaurants, that probably is the case, is that they are struggling to find housing affordable to their incomes, and they're doubling up and tripling up to make ends meet. Another issue that we identified, and this is part of our social infrastructure analysis, is, and as identified by the Center for American Progress, approximately half of the census tracts, or roughly half of your city, is classified as an infant and toddler child care desert. Most of you are familiar with food deserts. This is akin to not having enough licensed child care facilities in many areas of your city. And the way that they define that is a particular census tract, if it has at least 50 or more children 5 years or younger, and then they look at how many licensed child care slots are available in that given district, and then they determine whether or not it's a desert, or in this case, a child care desert. What's the so what question here? So what question is, it's an economic development issue as much as it is a social issue. Obviously, we want to see moms and dads have their kids well taken care of, but to the extent that they don't have those services available to them, obviously it can be very disruptive to the local economy as well. It could also end up costing employers a lot more money for them to step in and fill the breach where they have to pay for that particular service for their employees. One of the ways that this can be addressed in your comp plan is to look at spaces that may be more amenable to being a child care facility, particularly when it's located next to a large labor center or where there are a lot of people working. The healthcare industry is your driver of this economy, and again, we see that in a lot of places. The employment related to LGH is estimated at about 9,000 workers, give or take a few hundred. And I imagine that will probably remain that way as the population in the region, not so much in the city, but particularly in the region, continues to age. When you combine the healthcare super sector, which includes social services and assistance with educational services, that represents about 40% or 4 in 10 jobs in your city. So on the one hand, you have a local economy, at least as far as those industries are concerned, that is recession-proof. A recession may come, but relatively few of those folks will get laid off. On the other hand, a large percentage of the folks that work in those two industries are at the lower income levels, all right? And again, this is another reason why you have such demand for affordable housing, is you've got a lot of workers who are working in industries that traditionally don't pay a lot. This is another issue, is you do have a growing, food and hospitality industry, which obviously creates a lot of good service jobs. And some of those jobs, do offer career path employment. and we want to see, more people go into, at least insofar as they can make a career out of, whether it's working at a nice restaurant and earning a decent wage or being a chef. A lot of times these jobs are now, they've upped their wages by, $2 and $3 an hour. So the wage rates have risen. We're recommending that perhaps this too has job training associated with it. Maybe there's a space to train people in hospitality, fields, such that you've got a built-in, employment base for those businesses here in the city. And we talked about manufacturing. Again, we think that there should be, employment training or job training on a consistent basis, and it's just a question of establishing it and probably working in partnership with your local schools to do so, as well as the community college. We heard this particularly most recently during our sessions that we held on policy. Arts and culture is the cornerstone of the city. These are direct quotes from that session. The arts community is what attracted some to the city of Lancaster. There are not enough spaces available for local working artists, and working artists cannot afford to live in the city. It's a common refrain we hear in a lot of places. And then we need working space for performing artists, principally. And we also heard that the arts community is somewhat siloed in this city. In other words, there are different organizations representing the arts, but they don't always get together and talk, right? And, again, that's kind of a common refrain among certain communities, that they can be siloed. So, one of the recommendations there is that there is, dialogue kind of cross-cutting across different organizations, and that it happens on a regular basis, and perhaps the city can help foster that. We also heard comments from those who attended our session that perhaps the redevelopment authority could help facilitate arts housing by acquiring spaces or taking some of the spaces that they currently own and making upper floors available for artists at a reduced cost. So just ideas. Transplants from outside of the county have increased the city's entrepreneurial talent base. We are aware there are obviously a lot of people that are moving into the city, and not just from outside the city and not just from outside the county. We've heard tell of people coming from New York, San Francisco, Texas, from all over, and that's a great thing. And they're bringing their experiences and their talent with them. With that, we would expect that you're going to get a lot more people starting home-based businesses, which, this is something that I think the comp plan needs to, reflect. Certainly the zoning should be accommodative of people doing home-based businesses, or be accommodative of adaptively reusing buildings. And with that, I will take questions.
Thank you, Mr. Poole. Question from the commission.
Todd, I'll offer you a question while we're waiting for any commission members to ask questions. I'm curious whether you have any reflections on how the short-term rental market may be skewing or not the housing markets. I mean, for instance, clearly there's higher revenue source there for those, and I'm curious whether that whether you looked at that at all in your housing study, or whether that's something that you've looked at in other communities to consider how that may be impacting not just supply, but in particular the price points that are available to residents for purchasing a home.
You're talking about Airbnb short-term rentals, or
Airbnbs, VRBOs. I mean, there are a variety of platforms.
Right.
Yeah.
It absolutely is disrupting the housing market. I mean, it's just, more units that are just not online to be either rented in a conventional way or sold. We did not look at that specifically for Lancaster, but I've done that kind of review regionally. And one of the things that I did hear recently is there are a number of people who are actually getting out of hosting their homes as, on Airbnb and VRBO because of the, increased fees that are being charged to them that they have to pass along. And of course, there's a lot of pushback from would-be renters of those short-term properties. So I don't know how that's going to shake out, but the simple answer to the question is every unit that comes offline in this city hurts, if only a little bit. And so, yes.
And just one quick follow-up question with the mobile job market these days. I mean, that's sort of the flip side of the equation is creating a more hospitality-driven community, a part of the future of economic development for cities, given that people can put them, plant themselves wherever they may be if they have a remote job.
Wait, restate that. I'm sorry.
Sure. I guess the question is, really that short-term rentals provide one way that people can come and go through your community,
Correct.
especially if they have
Correct.
a mobile job. And so does providing for that actually, is that a future economic development strategy for communities? I recognize that that's also in direct conflict with the residents who live here, who need that housing too. So wondering, I know that that's a complicated question, but I don't know if you have any reflections on that nexus.
Given the severe or acute shortage of affordable housing in the city and recognizing the fact that, yes, that creates economic development by having folks who come in and kind of are economic development tourists, if you will. They've got a job, they're doing something here short term, and then they're going to move on. I don't think it's enough to justify taking those units out of the supply stream, right? And obviously, it's a market decision, so it's nothing that you can control directly necessarily, maybe indirectly. However, I don't think it is worth the cost of, keeping people from having a rental property or keeping people from owning a property.
I have a couple of questions, sir. I heard you make mention of recommendations as far as the city using certain buildings, and make it into two-purpose, three-purpose building to include housing.
Right.
One, is this housing study a public document yet?
The market study that we've created, which includes a section on housing, is, I don't know, Douglas, is it available yet?
It is available, and if anyone would like to look at that, it's on the ourfuturelancaster.com comprehensive plan website. If you go to documents, the document is called Lancaster Today, and actually we just posted a revised version of that recently after adjusting some language and updating data. So I can add that to my email that I'll follow up with you all on and provide you some information.
So the other part of that is, after mentioning that recommendation, is there a list of recommendations to the city related to all of these findings?
We are not quite at the full recommendation stage yet. We're actually just getting into that. Because we are at the process, or at the point now where we're developing policy guidance, goals, objectives, and the policies that will stem from those. So those recommendations will happen very shortly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Quick question, maybe a quick question. Todd, thanks for the presentation. I thought it was really thorough and helpful. You mentioned that the city allows ADUs. Did you guys look into, I don't think we've seen that many of them being actually built, so I'm curious if you looked into, reasons why people aren't taking advantage of that allowance and maybe some ways that we could incentivize more folks to build ADUs.
Well, here's the answer I will offer, because we talked about this a little bit in one of our sessions. One, it probably is not well known yet among a lot of your city residents, which isn't a surprise. It's not something like, oh, do you, talk to your neighbor across the hedges, hey, do you know you can do ADUs now? So I think probably publicizing it better that residents have this opportunity. Two, not every property or house lends itself to creating an ADU. You really have to have the right property, right? So for those who aren't familiar, the best example is, a couple that's nearing retirement or just went into retirement has a single-family detached house, and maybe they have a garage, and they have the ability to build a, second floor above the garage, or turn the garage into a small flat, 400 square feet, 500 square feet, right? Studio apartment. That's a great example of an ADU. Or you have a big enough lot where you can literally, add on, again, another 500 or 600 square feet. As you might imagine, not every house lends itself to being able to do that. And then, of course, even if you have such a property, maybe you're not so inclined because you just don't want to. So there are a variety of reasons why it's not happened yet. However, I'll add this piece. Where we do see it happening, a lot of the folks who are taking advantage of it are taking advantage of it for economic reasons, right? It's a way to defray their costs, particularly if it's someone on fixed income, and you can create an ADU at a, relatively affordable cost to generate the income that's going to, come with that ADU could make a lot of sense. So I think over time you will see an increase, but I think right now it's still relatively new for folks. And again, it all depends on what kind of property you have.
I'm curious if, because I know Lancaster is a very young city, I'm curious if we know what the quote-unquote like turnover rate is from like high school to those 20 years, if we see a lot of our residents leaving the city, and if then, for example, F&M brings an influx of young people then in that age range that kind of fills our gap. Do we have any way of knowing that? Yeah.
Without surveying residents, no, and we haven't done that.
Okay. And then I guess a follow-up to that is, when you're in college, you're almost loving to live off campus. That seems to be a dream for a lot of college students, to get out of the dorms. Do we know to what extent college students may have an impact on our housing market?
Well, I'll tell you this. Most college towns will experience upward pressure, particularly on rental properties because of a nearby college, right? And you're no exception. As a matter of fact, I can guarantee you that if F&M weren't here, you'd probably see a pretty significant reduction in cost of housing. Because it's not just the students, but it's obviously staff and faculty, right? And so, how much that is, I don't know. We've not studied that, but I can guarantee you that it absolutely has influence on the price of, rent and the price of, a for sale unit.
Okay, thank you.
You've signaled out downtown upper floors for potential artist areas.
I didn't signal that. It was recommended. Okay. Yes.
Okay. What are currently on those floors?
These are properties we were told where if the redevelopment authority may have a building that has empty upper floors that were formerly occupied, whether it was office space or possibly it was residential, but no, it is now uninhabitable because it's in disrepair or whatever, but it's just sitting there. The thought is taking those properties, or at least to the extent that the redevelopment authority has a policy to do so, is to make one or more of those properties available for artists at a subsidized level, or enter into an agreement with a nonprofit developer to make them affordable. I mean, it's really no different than what the redevelopment authority would do, entering into a relationship with an affordable housing developer. Just in this case, the housing would be targeted to artists, and so there would be a covenant in place, and you'd have people screening who's legitimately an artist to be able to live in that housing.
Do you have any examples of that being done anywhere else?
Sure, we could certainly identify those for you. Yeah,
I'd love to see them.
Yep.
I just know upper floor housing, especially adaptive reuse of old buildings, can be very cumbersome in terms of the money that it costs to renovate them and meet building code, and that a lot of communities, I think, are having a hard time. Or developers are having a hard time in communities trying to meet the standard of the code in order to transform that into housing, and so.
Right.
Yeah.
There's actually, when I many years ago when I worked in the city of Camden. There's an outfit out of Minneapolis, and I know they have arts in the name, and I forget the rest of it, but all they do is focus on the development or redevelopment of housing for artists. And they have a whole kind of game plan on how that works. But there are great examples of doing it. And yes, you have to partner with a nonprofit. You're going to have property that's really just being, gifted over because it doesn't pencil out.
Any public comment? Yes. To the mic.
Hello, my name is Paula Jackson, a long-term city resident and former city planner, and really enjoyed your presentation. There are a few of us in the room here that are members of the Lancaster Downtowners, and I don't know if you're familiar with that organization yet. Okay, and it's a nonprofit organization, and it's geared more to seniors who want to age in place, be in the community. Many of us are still homeowners. Many are apartment dwellers as well. But I think the walkability of Lancaster and the access to the arts and the restaurants, it really makes Lancaster City a desirable place for aging in place. And Lancaster has been designated as an age-friendly community. That might have been 2 years ago or so. It was a resolution of City Council. And I just wanted to see how your housing study would address the ability to enable older folks to stay in their homes, whether they're owner occupants or renters.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Todd. My name's Chris Kennedy. I live at 10 North Market Street in the Hager Building. And my work in the city is as the advisor for Age Friendly Lancaster City. And I'd like to start by complimenting our Planning Bureau. My work before moving to Lancaster was on a national level, a speaker circuit at conferences for housing and aging and that sort of thing. And the inclusion of looking at the needs of older adults within the comprehensive planning process is something that is very new, very cutting edge in the planning world. And it's happening here in Lancaster, having the age-friendly lens throughout the comprehensive planning process. So Douglas, hats off. Thank you. Before I talk about specifically age-friendly planning or housing, a couple of the things that you said, Todd, that I wanted to just comment on in terms of the entrepreneurial aspects of youth, the 50%, over 50% of entrepreneurial startups now are by people 55 plus. And of those that are started, 82% are successful, which most entrepreneurial efforts, only 10% make it past the first year. So there's a number of reasons for that, but we do have a very well-educated population of older adults in Lancaster, and many of them will want to continue to work and contribute for fee or for free. So that's one thing to think about. A second thing, Todd mentioned that many of our Latino populace want to live and desire multi-generational housing. In addition to that, there is a drastic rise of families that are becoming what are now called grand families, meaning the grandchildren have needed to come back and be parented by their grandparents. And so that is a multi-generational phenomenon that is growing year by year. And then while the average age may be 33 now, that 33 averages some of our older adults plus 25 years from now, they're going to be 58. And so we want to have a community where people can know that they can stay generation to generation. So what I want to talk about are two things. One is we have within the Age Friendly Action Plan for action projects of which one of them is housing creation and preservation. And the team lead for that project is Douglas. And so that specifically is included within, the work there is included within the comprehensive planning process. And we were invited to have a session at the policy workshops specifically on age-friendly housing. And again, that's like a breakthrough nationally. So within our age-friendly action plan for housing creation, there are two of the key initiatives that are review the age-friendly housing practices highlighted by the WHO on the Age Friendly World website, focusing particularly on the cities in the United States. And second, there's one that says review comprehensive plans from other cities that specifically address the needs of older adults. That review has been part of the action project. And from that, cities like Lancaster, who are among the nearly 500 cities in the U.S. that have become members of the WHO global community of age-friendly cities, have looked at putting policies in place around age-friendly. And what has been said is that adopting equitable housing goals and housing-related policies will afford current and future generations the ability to age in place within a supportive and vibrant community. I'm going to read off the titles of 6 of the different policies that have been included, and I have the full description of them here and have shared that with our Planning Bureau. So this is to let you know the sorts of things that are important when we look at what does age-friendly mean. It means put your gray glasses on. It means look at what you're looking at from the perspective of older adults, because most planning up until this time, since the 1950s, has been looking at how do we work with our family of 4, how do we build a community for children to grow up in and be safe in. But the numbers are shifting now. So among the things to be considered or that are being considered, and we do have examples of in other comprehensive plans of age-friendly cities, are adaptable housing, physically accessible housing, accessible design for all, aging in place, responding to social isolation, and affordability. And part of that affordability is maintaining the home that you're currently in. And so there are programs that were these things to be among the policies and values of the City of Lancaster. When we adopt the comprehensive plan, then we would be in a position to pursue certain programs and projects that relate to those values and grants that are coming into place from different organizations around older adults and aging in place. So thank you for letting me speak to this.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? So I guess, Mr. Poole, you said you weren't familiar with the Downtowners group?
Not particularly, no.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
The
I've
outreach,
heard the name, but I didn't come.
yeah, we have done some outreach with the Downtowners, but it's mostly been staff-led. Since, a lot of our local partners we like to work directly with at a staff level. So we look forward to more input from that group going forward. If the commission does have additional questions for Mr. Poole, please feel free to email them to me. I can put them together and then forward them along.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Poole.
Thank you.
5, subdivision and land development stretch plan presentation by RGS for yard, AKA Stockyard at 1147 Lidditz Park. The lot located at the corner of North Duke Street and Marshall Avenue is proposed for redevelopment by 1147 Holding LLC, a subsidiary of SDL Devoco SDL. The redevelopment includes replacement of the Stockyard Inn, the former Jimmy Deluxe Grill restaurant structure, and some existing parking areas with five-story multifamily housing buildings, including 226 units, 12,200 SF of commercial space oriented towards Marshall Avenue and on street and off-street parking spaces. Yes.
Good evening, commissioners and staff. My name is Ben Lesher, president of SDL DevCo, the developer and owner on this project, and it's a pleasure to be in front of you this evening and have a discussion about our site plans and proposed development. I just want to kind of share a high-level overview, and then I'll turn it over to Ben Morton here to kind of walk through the plans. I'll try to keep it brief. I'm really excited about this site and the opportunity to develop a mixed-use project near the Lancaster train station and hope that it becomes a catalyst for more transit-oriented development in that area. One of the other goals is obviously to build a lot of housing on this site. Right now we're looking at about 226 apartments. You just heard the housing study. We're doing a lot of smaller units to meet the demand for that in the city. And I'm also really happy to say that I'm trying to get about 20% or up to 45 of the units affordable to about 60% of AMI. Actually, yesterday evening, the city's ARPA Housing Review Committee just recommended to City Council that the project receive $2 million to support those efforts. And we're also applying to the county and other sources to make that happen. Thirdly, we are preserving a historic resource. Many of you have maybe eaten or celebrated at the Stockyard Inn restaurant. We are actually proposing to adaptively reuse that and relocate part of it to become the clubhouse for the apartments. And then lastly, we just think it's a great opportunity to redevelop an underutilized site that is mostly vacant at this point, but is surrounded by lots of infrastructure, transportation, public services, all kinds of things. Is also an urban growth area and helps us preserve, natural resources and farmland in other parts of the county. So with that, I'll turn over to Ben Morton.
Good evening. As Ben said, I'm Ben Morton from RGS Associates, a landscape architect and the project manager for this project. And also, like Ben, I'm very excited to be here speaking with you about it this evening because it is such a wonderful opportunity, we think, to revitalize this site. The presentation tonight will try to move through these pieces to give you a nice overview of what we're proposing, starting by looking at the surrounding context, briefly looking at the existing conditions, and then moving to our proposed site plan and giving you some of the highlights of what is on there. And then we do have a few 3D renderings of what the project is hoped to look like. So what we've got on the screen right now is sort of the broader view of the project site. As Ben noted, this is a key gateway into the city along Lidditz Pike, and it's also located near the train station. More specifically, it's bounded to the north by Marshall Avenue, and there's Stauffer Park further to the north. On the east side, we have the Stockyard Office Park. To the south, the railroad itself, and then Lidditz Pike is to the west, though we don't actually front up against that road. There's a large PennDOT stormwater management facility between the project site and that road. So looking now at the existing conditions, the site is about 4.5 acres and it's in the city's mixed-use zoning district. There are two existing buildings. The one Towards the east is the Jimmy's Restaurant. That building will be demolished. And then the larger building is the Stockyard Inn and the various additions that have been added to that over the years. That, as Ben said, the oldest section is going to be rehabilitated and relocated on the site, which we'll see in a minute. But before changing screens, I'll just note, you'll see the access drive coming in from Marshall Avenue that was constructed as part of the initial phase of the Stockyards Office Park. Those roadways do help to create some of the structure of how we've laid out the site, given utilities in those areas and that better access they afford to Marshall Avenue than the driveways that we're serving the Stockyard in. So turning down to the site, I think it's important to highlight where we've moved the inn, because this relocation was really important to maximizing and getting to the highest use of this site. So the inn is in purple in the northeast corner, situated right by the entrance to the project. So you'll be able to see it when driving by on Marshall Avenue, entering the site. And also, we've definitely verified this when we were working with Historical Commission that it will still be visible actually from Lidditz Pike when you're approaching the city from the north. The inn itself is situated around our amenity core of different types of open space, which then is framed by the two buildings that we're proposing as part of the project. As was mentioned, there's 226 apartment units and about 12,000 square feet of commercial uses on the ground floor along Marshall Avenue. So Building A is the building that is along Marshall Avenue and then goes down the west side of the site. The dark orange area, or dark orange areas do indicate where there's actually enclosed building at the ground level. So along Marshall Avenue is where that 12,000 square feet of commercial uses are. As you're then moving down that spine along the western boundary, the lighter orange area is where there's parking under cover. And then we have 4 stories of residential units above those ground floor uses. And the residential lobby is that rectangle of dark orange right there that's being highlighted. I'll also note that there's a pedestrian passage between the parking section and the commercial area that helps to create a more direct route to the Lidditz Pike Marshall Avenue intersection. And then Building B, which will be, your view as you're coming into the site, similarly has an area where there's ground floor interior uses and a lobby, and then parking that is beneath the 4 stories of apartment units above. We have 277 parking spaces on the site, which is just slightly above what's required for the uses. Bicycle parking, we have sort of in 2 formats. There are smaller bike racks situated around the site to facilitate use by residents, guests, and commercial users by the various entrances. And then we have 45 spaces that are provided internal to the buildings, either in a bike storage room or within the covered parking areas for, dedicated resident use. And I'll also just note that about 1/3 of the parking is undercover here. Along Marshall Avenue, the plan is to dedicate some additional right-of-way to the city, which will allow us to create on-street parking spaces, provide the planting strip and street trees, as well as the pedestrian access route at an acceptable width in the sidewalk to all be in the public right-of-way. Speaking of pedestrian routes and those sorts of connections, it's important to note that there is Red Rose Transit Service on Lidditz Pike. There's also a neighborhood-oriented route that skirts the office park site to the east that is about within a 1/4 mile of this site. We have been investigating a connection to the train station that would avoid needing to use sidewalks along the roadways by trying to go under the Lidditz Pike Bridge. Unfortunately, and our discussions have really honed in with talking to the Lancaster County Planning Commission staff, and the railroad has made very clear to them that they don't want to see a path within their right-of-way, and there isn't any space between the bridge itself and that right-of-way. And then even if they were amenable, there are there's infrastructure that's in the way of providing that path. which is a disappointment, but something that we did sincerely look into. We have worked with the fire chief and the fire marshal to make sure that we're coordinated on having emergency access to the interior of this site. And, the same thing with having our trash enclosure areas accessible to trash trucks in areas that are well screened, and with a concierge service to actually take the trash out to those areas from the building. On this screen, the highlighted areas in pink or purple are just showing where we anticipate underground stormwater management to meet both the city's 1-inch first flush volume management, as well as the 50% release rate reduction that's required on this site. And then I guess at this point we can go to some of the photos, Mandali. These were images that we created as part of our review process with the Historical Commission. Back in the spring, they did recommend approval, and City Council did approve the certificate of appropriateness. Here we're looking west on Marshall Avenue. You can see the new ends location situated on the corner, and how we think we've bridged the scale well with the new building that really does help to frame this streetscape. Here's a view looking north along Lidditz Pike. You can see some of that separation that we have from the street. I think you can kind of glean from these images, though not sure how clear it is on your screens, but there's a walkway along the side of the building, a bit of the distance there, and then that does lead to that passageway that helps get you into the center of the site more directly from the corner. This is just another image looking across the intersection. And then we had one view here that's not merged with the surrounding landscape, but does give you a sense of some of the amenity spaces and what we're trying to create through both the structure of the buildings and how they form that space. I guess I'll just say at this point we've have the Historical Commission approval, and we've also visited the Traffic Commission and have their conditional approval on elements that they control, with the understanding that we'll be working through detailed design with Planning Commission and city staff on those elements. And at this point, we're really looking forward to getting your comments and feedback so we can move forward with this project.
Good evening. I have probably about 3 questions, so please forgive me, but they will be concise. The first one is related to the trees that appear to be along the parking areas and in other places. I've noticed the adjacent office park, the trees have struggled. I walk there often, and I noticed that many of them have died over the years, have been cut down, replanted. What can be done differently with this project, especially with residential there? I think the trees have even more of an impact on the residents there to help prevent that from happening.
I mean, I think part of it, not being able to speak to what was done over there really, but I just know in our creation of plans, we do take care in terms of soil mix selection, and even just making sure that when the contractor is doing construction that we are making sure that's meeting spec. We are going to be meeting with Cody Kiefer to work through ideas, particularly on the planting strips between the roadway and the sidewalk, to understand what we should be doing there that works with the parallel parking, but will also make for more successful space for trees to grow. So it's definitely on our mind. And I think in the parking spaces as well, we were able to be fairly generous with how those islands are being, just with the geometry of the site has created a lot of areas where they're somewhat larger than the minimum 5-foot width of soil that one would need.
The second question would be related to one of the renderings. It would be looking from Lidditz Pike at the corner. Yeah, right there. I know there's a lot of utility infrastructure dealing with the bridge. Will that telephone pole be there in the actual final plan, or is that going to be buried somehow? Because it just seems so awkward with 3 poles in that little area, but then it's just this beautiful park behind it. I don't know if that's in the purview of what we do here, but it just really sticks out in that rendering.
No, I realize that, but I think it's an honest depiction of the fact that really trying to relocate that sort of infrastructure that's serving a lot of other sites.
It would cost more than the building.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And finally, I know there's a game coming. With the roof structure, how does the water from that, would that be flowing into the parking lot, stormwater, or where does that go?
From the buildings?
Yeah.
Yes, it's all of the building is going to be directed to.
It's included in that?
Yes.
Perfect,
Yep.
thank you.
I got a question about, okay, I appreciate you wanting to connect across without needing to use the current pathways. I think it's on the adjacent lot. Maybe you have had a specific conversation about this with the train company, but I was going through one day because I heard from one of my neighbors that there is an old tunnel that runs.
I've seen that.
You've seen that.
Yeah.
Do you know what's up with that? Like, just out of curiosity?
I don't. I'm kind of glad you reminded me because it is something I'm curious about.
Okay.
How that even came into being, but.
Yeah, because I don't know if it runs over the train tracks or if it goes under them, but it definitely seems like it could be something. And if you guys are able to make use of that, I'm all for it.
That's something we can look at.
I believe it's on the adjacent property owner's site, but that was, I guess, a relic now from the stockyards. They actually used it as sort of a cattle chute to get livestock on the other side so they could load on both sides of the railroad.
So it does go under the tracks?
I believe so. Douglas actually had been asking me, I don't know if you did any more research, but
I didn't find out whether it's actually connected or not. And just my aerial imagery search, it looks like on the south side of the train tracks, there's no longer an opening. On the north side, there is. I'm not sure what happens in between.
Okay. Field trip.
I have a question again, sir, about the affordable housing. Tell us again how that will be arranged, how those housing units are going to be.
Sure, yeah, they're going to be throughout, no different than any of the other units, so they're going to be sort of spread throughout the both the buildings, and the unit mix will pretty much mirror the unit mix of the whole project. So right now, we're trying to get 45 units affordable to households earning 60% of the area median income, and that's adjusted for household size.
40 units or 40%?
45, which is about 20%.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm actively seeking funds to do that. So it seems like I'll receive 2 million from the city in ARPA funds for that. Also applied to the county for about 3 million, and then some other funding sources as well.
Do you see that based on the housing study that was just done or any recent study that is meeting the needs of the low income?
I hope so. I mean, I believe in the city's ARPA RFP, which I believe pulled some data from the interim housing study, it said that I believe 300 new units were needed, affordable units were needed in the city in the next 5 years, I want to say. So it's going towards that, but we probably need some more.
Okay, thank you.
Is there a bus stop that's going to be located right at the facility, right at the project? I mean, I'm sure there isn't one there right now. There's nothing there.
Not right at the project itself, given that the bus routes don't actually go right in front of our Marshall Avenue frontage, and I think it'd be a larger issue of Red Rose Transit making decisions about the need to reroute a bus to be closer. But I believe from looking at the app. There's not a bus stop with a waiting area in the location, but this is an area where buses do stop just north of the Lidditz Pike intersection.
So the bus would stop where?
I'm not certain exactly.
Okay.
I was going to say, I
that
think,
far up.
Marshall Avenue entrance, I can understand why it wouldn't be there, but it seems like at the corner of Marshall and Lidditz Pike, there seems to be a great opportunity for a bus stop right there, especially with the facility of this size.
I think you're right, although the design of that intersection may be a little problematic.
You mentioned that you're providing more parking than what's required. Like how much more?
I believe it's been in flux at times as we've moved things around, but I think somewhere around 10 spaces at this point. And some of those may actually be considered loading and short-term spaces to help us accommodate, changing uses of sites.
Okay. Yeah, I was curious as to why you're providing more, but maybe to have some more flexibility.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And sorry, my second question then, which, if I'm looking at this correctly, and maybe this is what you were trying to get at with that, with providing, a different form of access to the train station, but like if you're in the southern part of that residential building, I guess you'd have to walk basically up to the intersection to access the sidewalk to get over.
That's correct.
And I guess there's nothing you can really do about that because of the stormwater infrastructure that's there?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, just one more. And this might be a question for you, Douglas, not directly related to the parcel, but has there been any broader conversation about pedestrian connectivity along Marshall Avenue to amenities like Lancaster Catholic High School or ABAG or any of the things that are going on over there, especially with that many units? I know there's an existing streetscape, but there's some also pretty wide driveways and throats going through there. And so, again, probably not directly correlated to your parcel, but just a broader question as to whether that's been something that's been talked about. Do you know anything about that?
It's a great question, Steve. And at the moment, the connectivity studies that we have going on, like the small area plan for the train station, actually end roughly at this parcel and don't look beyond it. We do have some recommendations in our active transportation plan, but I don't have them committed to memory for this site. I do agree with you that, the connectivity from here into, I guess you're saying the eastern part of the city rather than going over the bridge, it does become much more critical with this kind of residential density. So that's something we can certainly look at. With, development opportunity to the east, it's possible that some of those opportunities could be explored.
Mr. Smith, I got a question for you. So once something like this is presented to us, it becomes like public record. So someone from the public can request these images, correct?
Certainly. Yes. I mean, if an application is submitted, really everything the city does is technically public record with some minor exceptions. But yes, I'd be happy to share these images or the presentation with anybody who needs it. And have we forwarded this to the Planning Commission yet? We have, so you can feel free to forward it on yourself if you would like.
Okay. That I think is all I had. Oh, well, I guess the only other thing I want to say in regards to bus routes, and I'm glad that we're talking about them, I feel like there's an opportunity for us to try and re-coordinate some of these routes with Red Rose Transit Authority. Like, I live in the neighborhood, and I think it's the 5 that runs that other route, the Grandview, and it just isn't optimal for me to utilize. But seeing developments like this come about that have such a high volume of people, I'd love for there to be a conversation with all the property owners to see these actually become more usable for city residents to get us where we need to be.
One more question for clarification. Is Building A where all the commercial space is?
Yes, it
Yes?
is.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Okay, any public comment? Hearing none. Thank you, Mr. Morton.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Number 6, Redevelopment Authority of the City of Lancaster, RACL. A, appropriate land use for 502 and 506 West Walnut Street. B, certification of blight for 523 Woodward Street.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple of comments to make, and I would suggest that the commission takes these issues separately in their vote. So I want to recap briefly the long history of the 502, 506 West Walnut Street property, otherwise known as the G.E. Richards Building. And Mandela, if you could pull up an image of the building for reference, that could be helpful. Thank you. So this property has been vacant for, sorry, I think this is the Woodward Street property. Do we have the 502, 506 West Walnut? Oh, and you can pull it up on, maybe just on Google Street View. So this property was actually certified blighted in 2013. It had been vacant for quite a long time then, and they at some point remedied their conditions of blight, and unfortunately the property failed to redevelop, and conditions of blight have returned to that property over the last many years. There have been fits and starts to development efforts here. But unfortunately, the persistence of these issues led the Planning Commission to certify this property as blighted just a couple of months ago. This has gone through the Property Reinvestment Board and recommended to you, certified for blighted by this commission, and then went on to the Redevelopment Authority, who has taken Act 1 and Act 2. So Act 1 is basically consideration for eminent domain. Act 2 is actually providing the go-ahead to staff to begin the eminent domain process of taking. And so the next step after that is this evening's recommendation for use. The Planning Commission, by state law, has to provide a recommendation for use of these buildings as they're taken by eminent domain. And then the Redevelopment Authority is bound to that recommendation if it were to take the property, and normally would issue a request for proposals from the community for redevelopment bids. So those redevelopment proposals would need to meet the use recommendation that's made this evening. This is a building with a long history. It has had commercial uses. I will venture to guess it's perhaps even had unpermitted residential uses at times, and is in an otherwise mostly residential neighborhood with some small businesses in the area. The recommendation that city staff would like to make on this property is to keep the potential uses flexible. And I can give you the exact wording here that we'd like to make a recommendation to the Planning Commission with. And that is the appropriate reuse of the above referenced property would be residential, commercial, or mixed use as generally consistent with the city zoning ordinance. We're making a a broad recommendation for use of this property because really it is a building that could serve many different functions. Each of those categories could have either an appropriate use or an inappropriate use. And I think it really will have to come down to the redevelopment authority making a decision with staff guidance on that and input as to which proposal really is best for this property and for the neighborhood and larger community overall. So with that said, I'm happy to take questions from the Planning Commission and then members of the public.
It's zoned R3, right?
Yes, currently it is.
So the recommendation for use does not need to follow the R3. I don't even know if they have special exception for commercial or.
So just let me clarify, the R3 district does allow a multitude of uses. You can have a strictly residential use of a property. You can have a commercial use of a property, like the formerly, I think, a barber shop was across the street. And there is some mixed use that's also allowed in the residential in the R3 district. For instance, apartments can be permitted in the district. So you could end up with any of these mixes or any of these uses in the R3 district. Although it's a residential district, we allow for, I would say, residentially compatible uses such as a barber shop or other things you might find in this neighborhood.
So it's not, and I don't know if you know this, but by right, it's not like they could go in and convert that to a full retail space, 2-story restaurant, et cetera, without a zoning variance or amendment.
I think that's mostly correct. I'd have to get into some. We'd have to get into some specificity about what kind of retail we're talking about, because some retail is permitted in the R3 and some may not be. So many uses could require zoning approval. What we've suggested here is general consistency with the zoning ordinance because we recognize that some uses are special exceptions, and we want to make sure that we're including here that special exception is really seen as, general consistency with the zoning ordinance, considering that certain thresholds are met for, impacts or low impacts to the neighborhood. We recognize that there may also be, some minor, and again, we're trying to be flexible in our thinking, but there could be some minor dimensional variances or something rather insignificant. But in general, we're looking for, as much consistency with what we currently permit in the district as possible. So a restaurant use here would not be permitted by right for the entire structure.
So I have a question, Douglas. Would this being previously blighted, then has come back, if it is recommended and approved for housing, does it automatically become if housing does come of this, is that automatically a low income commitment?
So it's a good question. The redevelopment authority does have an affordability policy. I would have to defer to their interpretation in this case, but the way that's been adopted is if it is a home ownership situation, redevelopment authority often is taking houses that are blighted and then putting them for sale for a homeowner. That would have to meet the 80% AMI requirement or 80% of the area median income for the county. And for rental, which it was a change in policy. For many years, it was only allowed for home ownership. The rental policy would be 60% area median income. Now, the redevelopment authority is not committed to is not compelled necessarily if the Planning Commission acts on this recommendation to create a purely residential use here. They could create any number of residential, commercial, or mixed uses. But yes, if it became residential, the policy that stands, unless an exception would be made, is they would need to be affordable units.
Very good. Thank you.
Sorry. So I know the number on this is 502 to 506. This is the corner lot though, right?
Yes, this is the corner lot, yeah, and those addresses are sometimes assigned to double wide lots that maybe at some point were, two lots, and now a large building occupies it. And it's also just for numbering consistency across the block for emergency responders and other things.
I just wanted to make sure, because to answer Steve's question, I know that there's some nuance in the zoning that if it's a corner lot, you have some special exceptions to certain commercial uses. And if I'm reading this right, I think a special exception is permitted for a restaurant up to 1,200 feet.
So you might be thinking of the storefront provision that we have in the zoning ordinance, and I would need to defer to our zoning officer as to whether he would consider what's there a storefront or not. I don't think that, my guess is that would not probably qualify as a storefront. There was a commercial use here before, but there are other permitted uses by right that they could probably convert to if it was not interpreted as a storefront.
Okay. I just read the word "or" here, and I figured it was one of those things that corner lots can be converted to storefronts at a later point. But regardless, I'm more curious because I know that we have the ability, if we want to actually visit properties. Is this property safe enough that we can visit and maybe make a more specific determination of how we would like to see it used? Because that might change our perspective, being able to see some of the guts. I have no idea what's inside here.
It is not safe to be in, which is why it's been condemned for so long, and the city does not have ownership of the property, or the redevelopment authority does not have ownership of the property. And so there are very, very specific instances under which any city employee would be able to enter this property, and so that would not be possible.
Sounds good. I just wanted to check. Because I think I gotta lean towards, I'm not opposed to seeing commercial uses here, but it would be nice to see it be a little mixed use more than one or the other, in my opinion. I think I like the idea that we can use it in multiple ways and not just one specifically.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, this is, I go past this building almost every day, and it has a lot of opportunity. So I like the idea of keeping it broad at the moment. I was just curious exactly what would be allowed in there by right and where that might go, when someone makes the investment to develop the property.
Yeah, and I can be a little bit more specific here to help you all out with this. So for residential, looking at by right uses, of course, single-family home is something that's by right. Apartments would be permitted. Yes, and when I say apartments, I mean specifically 2 units above a commercial use. So that is the mixed use scenario in this case, as Ms. Jackson well knows. Moving on, multifamily could be permitted as a special exception as well. So that would fit within the recommendation we're offering. And then moving on to commercial uses, Mr. Dastra's right that a 1,200 square foot eating, drinking establishment could be established by special exception. There's much more square footage in this building than that. Of course, specialty food store by special exception, grocery store up to 1,200 square feet by special exception. Again, all of these actually have specific square footage requirements. So these would be small, kind of mom and pop style sized stores. Pharmacy, again, up to 1,200 square feet. Retail store up to 1,200 square feet. And then getting into commercial services, there's mostly by special exception, beauty and barbershop with size restrictions, bed and breakfast, only up to 5 units by special exception. Professional services, catering services, daycare would be by right up to a certain number of children. Locksmith by Ray. I could go on. There are a number of other, I'd say that there's actually quite a few, commercial uses that would be permitted here. And really, any of them could be blended with apartment units on the upper floor.
Douglas, quick question. Is there any historical value to this building, or is it protected by historical preservation? I feel like this used to be a elementary school or primary school way back when.
So the historic protections here are through the Heritage Conservation District, which would review any new construction or demolition. But as the windows, unfortunately, being removed and swapped out for vinyl, those sorts of minor aesthetic changes would not be reviewable under the historic district. In terms of the previous use of the building, it would really be up to the future user to incorporate or capture that in the site development. I imagine this building could potentially be eligible for historic tax credits in the future if it were to be listed on the National Register. That's something that would be available, and then they would have to preserve, a lot more of the history of the building.
I think the only other question I have that just came to mind is, so this is going to Rackle. I don't know what I keep forgetting how this works exactly, but can the city, if we decide the housing is reasonable in here, can the city actually purchase and utilize the building to ensure affordable opportunities? Because I think there's also opportunity needed for affordable commercial as well. Can we use ARPA dollars for that?
So there are a couple of things there. The redevelopment authority really is the tool by which the city typically takes and reutilizes properties. But the redevelopment authority is not really set up to be a landlord per se. It's really to facilitate the movement of properties into the market for development. The city itself is a different, entity legally, and typically the city itself does not take properties by eminent domain. The redevelopment authority is really the tool that's used for that. Not say it never happens, but typically the redevelopment authority is that option. The redevelopment authority can do residential, commercial, or it's up to us really as to how we want to shape that use, and then they would need to implement that. Certainly, they have done commercial properties in the past. The Lancaster Creative Arts Factory is one example down on South Prince Street. Of course, the Convention Center is the most notable example, and Marriott, and there have been others in the past too.
Okay. I guess I think I was, I think I'm trying to get a grasp on, since this is going to Rackle, which is good, you're saying that then if the city should decide to, they could actually purchase it from Rackle.
I don't see any advantage in the city itself purchasing it because the city advises the redevelopment authority. We staff the redevelopment authority. I won't say we are the redevelopment authority because they make their own decisions and we do not have a vote. But for all intents and purposes, we are really facilitating the management of that entity. And we work very closely, and I know that there is a member here this evening, our Vice Chair, Jeremy Young, who sits on the Redevelopment Authority, and I'm sure is listening with great interest. Jeremy, thank you for being here. So we work very closely with the Redevelopment Authority, and recommendations are made to them for action. So the city owning it would actually, in my opinion, it wouldn't win us anything.
Okay, my question.
Yes.
What is the blight, and is it something substantial enough that the potential new owner will level the property?
So you're testing my memory here. That since the Planning Commission already acted on blight, I didn't come with those papers, but I know that there were a number of exterior and interior conditions, failing staircase, there were issues with flooring. It's unsafe to be in. My understanding is that the foundation or the structural integrity of the building is completely fine, but the interior conditions are not usable. There are also a number of exterior conditions related to the building. I think, broken windows, grass, weeds, trash, and other sorts of things that have been persisting.
Mr. Chair, I would like to make a motion then.
Oh, please.
Was there
No,
more?
Please. You can make the motion, and then I just want to make sure we invite public comment as well.
Any public comment? Oh, certainly we were there.
Good, thank you. Yeah,
Okay.
we are too, and, encourage you to be engaged in the redevelopment authority process as well. Yeah, thank you. It's okay, we stream these meetings, so for those who are listening on YouTube, they can hear
There is no
you.
score at the bottom of the first. All right, I'm Suzanne Anderson, 240 North Mary. A lot of things I've heard tonight have been encouraging in that the city looks like they want to keep in mind affordable housing, community business, commercial businesses, the mom and pops. One of the proposals right now is an 8-bed boutique. And we've been told as neighbors and by a potential developer that that's the only solution for this property. And if that is, okay. I moved into the city 14 years ago when the guy bought this place. I moved here because of its community. There are 4 Airbnbs between the 400 block of North Mary and the 200 block of North Mary. And in that space, there's also one on Pine Street. So I like being able to see my kids coming home down from rentals and being all crazy. I like having that community. So as you approve or don't approve as things move through, please consider, and I think you are, the fabric of that community and how it would be changed if we put another kind of piece there that doesn't help to build or to frame that community very well. So that was really what I wanted to say. And so my understanding is that the city still is intending to move through this reclamation process. Is that correct?
Yes, at this point, it is up to the redevelopment authority to make that decision. But as it stands right now, this is the last procedural step that needs to be made before they could take title of the property. There are still steps to get there that are administrative. For instance, getting an appraisal of the property is required, and that's going to require entering the building somehow. So, there are logistics to work out before the title is actually taken. But this is the last public meeting step before RACL would actually do that.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Good evening, everyone. Late night, Jeremy Young, 300 block of Pearl Street, and as Douglas mentioned, Vice Chair of the Redevelopment Authority. Not speaking in an official capacity or attempting to represent the RACL board by any stretch. So anything I say, I think just represents my own opinion or perspective as a member of that board. For the record, I also happen to serve on the Property Reinvestment Board when that board sent this property to you, to the Planning Commission, for certification of blight. And most recently, as Douglas noted, voted along with the other board members to take Act 1 and Act 2 on this property. I would say if there's any way, of course, not to bog down this process, because I think we owe it to the community, to the neighborhood here in particular, to make sure that something positive happens with this property. Just noting the very long period of time that it's been in this condition, the fact that it's been, at RACL not once but now twice, with the the threat of eminent domain taking. If there is any way to make an informed decision on what the acceptable use or uses for this property might be, and in taking the input of more of the neighbors, there are just 3 here tonight. I think that would be especially important, especially for this particular property and noting its history. So I don't know what flexibility we have there. I understand that it is one of the last steps in the process before a potential taking by eminent domain. But I think we owe it, again, to the community, to the residents of this neighborhood, to make sure that we're making the right decision on what the acceptable use or uses might be for this property. I also think it's important that we note and that all of you are educated on the challenges that the current owner has had in trying to bring his own visions for this property to fruition. Of course, this property, as noted, was built as a school. I think it was the Walnut Street School originally. So it wasn't developed, with the intention of serving as an apartment building or serving as a commercial building. And based on that fact, it's not especially easy to convert it to another use, noting zoning restrictions, which of course include parking requirements as well. I think that was a somewhat significant hurdle for the current owner. So I think having an understanding of some of the previous challenges in, redeveloping this property might be helpful as you make your decision. So just wanted to pass along those thoughts. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman.
I'd like to say I have a great amount of confidence in the redevelopment authority, and I think giving them maximum flexibility is warranted, and hopefully it provides the best opportunity to make the best use for the neighborhood.
So we have a motion.
Yes, I would like to make a motion, and hearing the public comment, that does truly weigh on it as well. I would like a motion to pass on to the redevelopment authority of the city of Lancaster, and I just had it right here, I apologize. Yes, the appropriate land use for 502 to 506 West Walnut Street to include residential, commercial, or mixed use as consistent with the city zoning ordinance. And I would like to add, with the possibility that if there are educational uses or daycare uses, that those would be considered.
I second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carried.
Okay. Thank you for everyone's input on that. Next property is the 523 Woodward Street. This property was condemned on April 9th of 2021. It has been vacant since. It was purchased by the landowner, the current landowner after that in September 2021. The letter of potentially eligible was presented in July and blighted in November 15th, 2021. The landowner provided a rehab agreement and planned to rehab the property in January 22 with a completion date of October 29th. However, the owner stated in the last Property Reinvestment Board meeting that the project would not be completed by the completed date provided. So the property owner has had many setbacks in trying to get the property renovated. Neighbors have made their opinion public during the meetings, and some work has been completed, including securing the foundation. The property was determined to move to the Planning Commission October 13th, 2022. So unfortunately, this property is being recommended for certification of blight. And then, of course, as you know, that it would come back to us for a use recommendation. And there are ongoing opportunities for the landowner to continue to negotiate with the redevelopment authority to prevent a taking. These instances are always a balancing act between, providing enough opportunity to the landowner to renovate and also not wanting the neighborhood to suffer from, ongoing conditions of blight. So, for now, staff is recommending that this be certified for blight, and we'll continue to be in conversation with the landowner.
comment.
Commissioner?
Public comment.
Douglas, what about the lot next to the house? They're not together, right? They're separate.
Let me pull that up. I just want to make sure I know which lot you're talking about. I think there is a side lot on this that's on the same property, but I want to double check. Come on, it's not loading. Sorry about that. I'm going to keep looking for that and try to answer that question shortly here. Are there any other questions while I'm trying to pull that up?
Yes, Douglas, how long has it been in this condition?
It was certified blighted in April of 2021. So for about a year and a half, it's been condemned. Before that, there were definitely ongoing issues here, but the condemnation occurred in April. So this was probably, if I had to guess, I don't have all of the fine details of this, but our condemnation process was greatly delayed during COVID, and we ended up with a backlog during that time that we were not fully in operation. So my guess is that this probably was in poor condition before the pandemic occurred, and then the pandemic really delayed our ability to get out and start certifying properties again. So April 2021 would have, been probably as soon as we would have been out, inspecting and being fully operable. So unfortunately, some of these properties have experienced setbacks because of the pandemic and delays.
Yes, I'm just considering the condition. I can imagine that it must have been in poor shape prior to that blighted date.
Yeah, that certainly didn't happen overnight, right? Yeah.
And do we know if the property next door is at all in any kind of jeopardy because of the structural, it looks like the whole back of that building was gone.
I do not know that offhand, but certainly I can look into that. Let's see, sorry, I'm still trying to find out the exact lot because my parcel map is not loading right now for some reason. Is this on the south or north side of the street? Does anyone know?
South.
Okay, it's on the south side. So then that large lot there on the side, that is part of the parcel. It's like a double wide lot. Let's see. So the land, it definitely is part of the lot. I'm sorry, it took me a moment to pull that up.
Mr. Chair, I'm also willing to make a motion on this one too, if there isn't any public comment.
Public comment? Hearing none.
All right, I would make a motion to the Redevelopment Authority of the City of Lancaster, a certification of blight for 523 Woodward Street.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second for blight for 523 Woodward Street. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none, motion carried. Number 7, comprehensive plan update.
No update, Mr. Chair.
No update. Other business?
Brief other business, I want to note that You may remember the city made a commitment to revisit its short-term rental policies after making amendments earlier this year. We've been starting to brainstorm some of those amendments as we've been learning through our discussions with landowners, enforcement issues, et cetera. So we would like to set up a subcommittee. I'd like to propose a subcommittee for the Planning Commission. In the past, a few of the members have served on subcommittees. I think Mr. Dastra, I know Mr. Hackett, and I forget who else, was it Ms. Cook too, that served on a zoning subcommittee for those amendments.
I think it was me, Mr. Hackett, Mr. Whalen, and Ms. Ritchie.
Yes, thank you. So I would like to propose that we set up another subcommittee, and I need no more than 4 members so that we can remain under a quorum, and it's not an official meeting. We can't consider official business as a quorum. I would prefer that at least 2 or 3 of the members be full-time members, only because they'll likely be voting. But I'm happy to certainly make space, depending on interest here, for an alternate position to remain involved too.
I would appreciate remaining involved.
Okay.
Just
I
'cause I
hear
was there.
interest from Steve and, Mr. Hackett, Ms. Shirk, and Mr. Dastra. Was there, okay.
Yeah, I'm interested, but as an alternate, I would
Yeah.
give preference to
Mr.
that.
Stoltzfus, yeah. Any other interest? We've got 2 alternates, 2 full-time members currently.
I'd be willing to do it. I just don't want it to be the white guy subcommittee.
Okay, appreciate that. Welcome anyone else who wants to participate. We have 4 members, so if we're satisfied with that, we can certainly move ahead. Okay. All right, thank you. I'll be in touch to set up a meeting and begin that discussion. And the idea would be for that subcommittee to sort of dive deep on an issue and then bring that back to the Planning Commission for consideration. We're hoping to do that at the next, perhaps at the next Planning Commission meeting, but we likely aren't looking at adoption until 2023, early 2023. So, all right, that's all I have for other business.
Okay. Any public participation? Thank you. We appreciate that. So at 8:44, that's what I thought. I check my eyesight here a little bit. 8:44. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? I have a motion.
Second.
I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. Meeting is over.